All right, as the students are coming into the classroom, they will be observing some organisms present and wondering what's going on. Okay. All right, so today in class, students, we are going to be learning about common plants and animals living in an aquatic ecosystem. Okay, you're thinking, well, why are these animals up here? Okay, we're going to be talking about food chains and food webs, and this is just an example of what might be a food chain or food web in a different environment. We are going to be creating a food web, illustrating the relationship of organisms in an aquatic habitat. And we're going to also be thinking about different environmental changes and how those would have an impact on the pond environment. Okay? Now you'll each be getting a worksheet here in a moment, along with pond life organism cards. Okay? And those are going to be used to create our activity, to complete our activity, I should say. So, but before we begin with that, let's discuss different organisms present in a food web, okay? So, can anyone think of organisms present in a food web? So, think about how organisms are interacting with each other, and maybe eating each other, maybe getting their energy from other sources, okay? So, we'll be thinking about that. And specifically, let's talk about 3 groups of organisms. We're going to be talking about producers, consumers, and decomposers. Okay? So let's talk a little bit, class, about any ideas you might have on what producers are. Does anybody have any ideas for me? Great, yes. Producers, they're going to be producing food for other people. Or where are they getting their food? Yes, they're getting their food from the sun, okay? From the energy from the sun, right? So the energy from the sun comes down, they're creating sugars with that energy within themselves and photosynthesizing, right? We're talking about them creating their own food. So they are producers in this ecosystem. They're taking ultimately that energy from the sun and transforming it into a type of energy that can be used by many other organisms in the environment. Okay, so we got the producers. Consumers, anybody got consumers? They're consuming stuff, right? Okay, so what does that mean? They're eating. Very good. Okay, so we have consumers that are eating other things. So what kind of things might these consumers be eating? They might be eating the plants, right? The producers. What else could they be eating? Other consumers, right? So what's the term we could use when a consumer is eating another consumer? Does anyone have any idea what that would be? Starts with a C. Carnivore. Very good. You guys got it. So a carnivore is an organism that eats another consumer. Okay? So a consumer eating another consumer is a carnivore. Okay, so can you give me examples of a carnivore? All right, so bears, right? They eat other things. Wolves, okay? Humans, right? We eat other animals. So yes, we are carnivores in some instances. There's some of us who, now do we humans only eat meat? Now maybe some of us want to, right? But no, we eat other things also. So there's another special name for those consumers, like humans, like bears, that would eat things other than just meat and plants. And that term starts with an O, an omnivore, okay? An omnivore. Omnivores eat both consumers and producers. So for us, in our instance, we are eating both meat, right? So cows, pronghorn, elk, chicken, okay? And we're also eating things that are producers. So like lettuce, peanuts, all sorts of things you could think of. So we are omnivores. Okay, so there are also other consumers, maybe some humans, who are a different type of consumer. They're not carnivores. They're not omnivores even, so they don't eat any meat. Okay, Pronghorn are an example of this. Elk are an example of this. And they are called herbivores, correct. Okay, so herbivores, they only eat the producers. So consumers that eat producers, okay? So we have another organism. So we got the producers, we've got the consumers, and we've got different groups of consumers. We've got carnivores, omnivores, and herbivores, okay? And additionally, there's one more group we're going to talk about that are present in food webs, and those are decomposers. Can anyone tell me what those decomposers do, or how those decomposers get their energy for life? Okay? Okay? So through other organisms that are no longer living. Okay? So through organic matter that is no longer alive. So this could be something like a mushroom. There are bacteria that are decomposers. Anything that would eat dead organic material. Okay? All right. So for our activity today, we are going to be working with a pond ecosystem specifically. And this pond ecosystem includes things like fish, aquatic organisms that are microscopic, which we're going to get a chance to look at another day. Things like phytoplankton, mosquito larvae. We're going to also look at organisms that don't necessarily live right in the water, but interact with those organisms. So things like raccoons, frogs, salamanders, herons. Okay, so I'm going to give you this life in a pond cards of organisms. Learn a little bit about those. On that sheet, there's information about what those organisms eat. So you're going to be thinking about which of those organisms are producers, which organisms are consumers, which organisms are decomposers. Okay, and then producing your own food chains based on those organisms. Okay, on this chart. After those food chains are created, we are going to create our own food web of this ecosystem, of this system. Okay, we'll get to working groups for this and have something nice we can display and have around a room. Be really nice. Okay, so let's take time now. I'm going to pass out your student worksheets, and your life in the pond cards. You guys can cut those out and start classifying those into producers, consumers, and decomposers. All right, you're back from our activity, and now we're going to take some time to do some discussion. Okay, let's think a little bit more about this. Let's think about how these organisms are interacting with each other. Okay, what if we removed an organism from the system? Does anyone want to volunteer an organism to remove from the system? Okay, let's remove the phytoplankton from the system. Okay, what happens if we remove that phytoplankton from the system? What did we decide those phytoplankton are? Yes, they're producers. Okay, producers are gone from our pond ecosystem. We also have those aquatic plants, right? But we're going to lose who eats those phytoplankton. Okay, so now do those organisms have anything to eat? Okay, if they are interested in eating the aquatic plants, there's aquatic plants still available for them to eat, correct? Okay, but let's say the only thing they'll eat, or only thing they're capable of eating, are those phytoplankton, because maybe they're so small they cannot eat the aquatic plants. Then what happens to those organisms? Okay, what happens to you if all of a sudden, what would happen to you if all of a sudden you don't have any food in your house to eat, right? We have to go somewhere else to get some food, or we're awfully hungry, and eventually it would be a problem for us. So same thing goes here. Okay, let's think about what would happen to the food web if a population of one of these organisms was to double. Okay, let's say the trout in our ecosystem, the population of trout doubles in our ecosystem. Okay, what are their food sources? How is that food source impacted? All right, good. Good. Okay, so let's think about one more thing. You guys have heard about, maybe you've heard about invasive species or exotic species. These are species that are not originally part of an ecosystem, okay? They grew somewhere else. So maybe they're from Europe, okay? Maybe they're from Asia. and they've never been around here before into these ecosystems that we're familiar with, these ponds that we know of, and all of a sudden we bring in one of these organisms. Okay, what might you predict would happen to this food web or to this ecosystem if one of those exotic or non-native organisms came in? Okay, good. Okay. So throughout this activity and throughout the lesson that I'd be doing with my students, we'd be assessing the students in several ways, both formative and summative at the end through the discussion. Additionally, the food webs that they construct are a form of performance assessment that I'm going to observe how they actually put these food webs together to see if they're identifying producers, consumers, decomposers, and understanding how they're interacting with each other. Okay. Additional ways that I would expand this project, given more time, I would spend more time thinking about real life applications in addition to planning for future lessons where we get to observe some of the microscopic organisms under the microscope. All right, thank you.